There I am. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I fall into the category of papers that show the warts and all of research, and there was no prize for that, but I might have competed well for that one, I think. What we're going to talk about today is the research that we've done on research, where we're able to look at the same panelists who filled out a national consumer study for us, but also showed up on our Connect panel. So we're able to see what their online behavior was on desktop and on mobile compared to what they told us. So it's active and passive comparison. So what I'll do first is talk about the research challenge. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing research on research? And I'm telling you about it at this stage because it informs the way we do some data fusion and data imputation downstream, which we try to do at a very large scale. It's interesting, the diagram that Scott showed you on the fusion approach that Comscore and Ipsos are using. So we're big proponents of integrating active and passive sources of data. That's one of our research challenges. The objectives of the study, some of the results, they're early results. We didn't get into a lot of the modeling yet, so these are pretty light for you to understand first thing in the morning, I think. And then a quick discussion. So what's the research challenge? Well, basically, we're trying to keep up with evolving and dynamic digital media consumers. So a lot harder for us to keep track of their media consumption and their different habits when they're on their phones and their desktop, as opposed to when there was less media available to them. And the answer for us at Consumer Insights in Experian is measurement science. And measurement science is the integration of active respondent data that we get from high-quality surveys. So we'll get demographics, attitudes and opinions, media consumption, brand preference, shopping habits from traditional survey done in a very high-quality way and linked to passive media measurement. We have a panel called Simmons Connect, which I just told you about, but also we own an entity called Hitwise, which again also does at scale with about 10 million panels per month in the United States. So massive scale, high frequency. We know everything that they're doing on their cell phones and on their desktops. So you get multiple devices and a lot of depth. Because the panel size is so large, you can actually see a lot of competitive intelligence and comparisons. So bringing these two databases together is the key. We're not going to ask people about all of their web visitation and all of their reading online or on their phone, because they're going to have recall problems. We know that. What we wanted to know was when we link the databases together and we use behavioral linkage variables, which are the strongest to bring together what we measure passively and what we measure through recall. And we just recently launched, and I want to say 4 or 5 weeks ago in the UK and in the last few weeks in Chicago, LA, and in New York, a product and a platform called Audience Viewer. We link Hitwise and NCS data, and it's version 1, and we know that we can continue to improve those linkages. So the research that I'm showing you here is our research on research to improve that linkage. What questions are we trying to answer with this research? Well, first of all, does revealed behavior align with recalled behavior, right? And we've seen this historically in other contexts where, and I'm sure in magazine readership, if someone asked me, I'd tell you I was reading Forbes, but I'm not going to tell you about some of the other magazines I might have been reading. And then, is recall more reliable when activities are more frequent? You'd think yes, because you should remember it, but there's also a lot of variance there. So one of the questions we're going to ask ourselves is which of those behaviors that are actually pretty consistent between recall and passive are also the most differentiating when we try to bring these databases together in a statistical fusion. So we needed to understand this a little more. What we don't get into in this paper, but it's ongoing research, is what demographic differences are there between recall and passive. And also we'll look at segments, when we create a custom segmentation, which of those actually work better when we look at their actual behavior online, given what we thought the segment would behave like. And when can we use passive data to supplement active data? So one of the tenets of a strong measurement science program is that I'm not going to add research questions to my survey every time I've got a new question that I want to answer. I'm going to see what's out there in the wild, what natural data sets are out there that I can take a measurement and link it through a statistical fusion or an integration, so I don't have to increase respondent burden. And you'll see that's an underlying premise all the time, is less is more. What can I understand that's already measured without having to use more and more respondent burden? So first, let me give you a little description of the data that was used. We have, of course, the NCS survey, which is about 25,000 adults every year. It's got 60,000 data points, all demos, lifestyle, shopping, brands, media behavior, a lot of psychographic and attitudinal data, very heavy there. And that's, of course, a very high quality survey, probabilistic sample. And then we have a Connect panel. So some of the folks who filled out the NCS for us also said, sure, I will download an app onto my phone, or I will download a desktop software meter onto my laptop or onto my desktop, and you can continue to passively monitor my behavior. So what we have are the same respondents. So in that sense, a single source. It's not directly over top. The folks who fill out the NCS may have been a month or two removed from when we were measuring them on their cell phone. But hopefully a lot of their behavior didn't change, because it's not like they got a new device or anything too dramatic happened month over month. So it's almost in line time-wise. And that Connect panel measures everything passively, of course. It's 24/7. It's your smartphone, your PC, your tablet, and it's all apps and browsing behavior, iOS and Android. We can talk about the challenges of measuring those two operating systems, and that's a whole other paper. But suffice to say, after all of that intersection of NCS and Connect panelists, we ended up with about 2,000 in the sample for both of those. So it was quite robust. And we made sure that the incidence level, so people who said, yes, I used the internet in the last month, and yes, I used my smartphone, was about 10%. So we made sure that we had pretty robust samples that we could look at. Now, the recall part of this, in the NCS survey, started with a gating question. So first we said, did you use an app in the last 30 days? And some people don't, if they don't use their smartphone. And if you said yes, then you were sent into an area that categorizes the app. So it wasn't specifically what website you went to or anything like that, but an app category. That makes a difference when we compare the recall and the passive data. So keep that in mind. One of the outcomes of the research is to inform the treatment that we use here in measuring this. So we're going to refine it based on the fact that here you need to say yes, and then you're put into a category rather than a specific site. For desktop, again, there's a gating question. Yes, I went to the internet in the last 30 days, but then there's actually specific websites. So there's some 160 websites, and from that, I think it goes into about 27 categories, 17 categories, and we ended up using about 27 of the top websites that had incidence levels that were high enough for us to feel they were reliable. All right. So we ended up with, out of 45 mobile app categories, we used 15. And on the side of the desktop websites, 27 websites out of a total of 12 categories finally made the cut in terms of what we would analyze. And you see some of the well-known sites and brands and different types of apps, from video, music, shopping, gaming, photos, et cetera. And you would be very familiar with most of those. All right, so let me show you now some of the results. This first set is for the mobile data, so cell phone. And what you see is the red bars are observed, and the blue are self-reported. And if self-reported and observed matched, all of these bars would be pretty much right on. And this is activity reach, okay, across the different 15 apps. I should say that there's not a lot of other research that has been able to take a look at this. And one of the ones that guided us a little bit was a couple folks from Google took a look at a study where they wanted to measure advertising effectiveness at scale. And the only way to get video and television at scale was to use surveys, because metered panels obviously are smaller for television. And they used four different ways of using self-report to measure video and television. And what they found was none of them were clean enough for the control group to use. There was too much error. Okay, so we know that we were expecting that there would be these differences because the recall is very difficult, especially for online behavior and mobile behavior. So we expected these differences. In terms of the sites that had the highest reach, for observed, you see social media, maps, navigation, location. But the blue for self-reported, we had weather. Okay, so it makes sense. So people remember the weather app and they report that and they tell us that. To make us feel a little bit better, what actually happens here is you can get an agree rate. If they told us they did it and we saw that they did it, there's an agreement rate. And actually the top 8 apps have very high agree rates, 80, 90%. So we have some comfort that if you did it and you told us you did it, we probably saw you do it. On the other hand, just because we saw that you used a particular app doesn't mean you told us. So there's sort of a false agree rate that's also quite high, and I'll show you that when I look at the desktop results. For video and television and location apps, which are way over here, they're way too low. And I think what's happening here is people don't know if they're watching a television or video on their phone. So they're reporting it incorrectly because the gating question then takes you to a category. You might be watching a YouTube video, and you might be watching a television show on your phone, and you report it as watching video. So the video difference is really high. It's about 58% if you see there between observed and recall. It's a little shocking. You probably know if you've been watching a lot of video, but you don't know if you're watching television or just videos. Okay, so people are confusing those terms, and it's part of that is our gating question and our treatment, because I think that those should both be higher. So to dig into a little deeper, what we wanted to do is take a look at, well, if you are using an app more frequently, are you more likely to self-report it accurately versus those who use it less frequently? And so this is not unexpected. We also want to look at whether there's demographic differences and other modeling behavior that we can do so we can control for intensity. Those are following steps that we're taking on this research. But yes, in fact, we do see this. So the lowest frequency, let's say, for social media was at 40%, and it goes all the way up to 64%. But that's still some 36% of the highest quartile of passive usage of social media apps that don't self-report, even though we observed it. Okay, so there's still a little more error there than we'd like, not inconsistent with what Gina Sanglane and Johnny Prothero from Google reported in their study that they presented at ARF a couple years ago. Well, okay, so that's mobile. What about desktop? Desktop, again, underreporting problem via self-reporting. So this is a little bit tougher. It's a bit of an eye chart because I show all 27, but you can see the pattern where the red bars of observed and the self-reported bars in blue are not lining up. Okay, and again, the top observed and the top self-reported also don't line up. Okay. So here, one of the things I wanted to point out was we can look at the agree rate. Actually, this time it's a little bit easier to see. So we actually drew another chart. This is when, if you told us that you went to a website and we actually observed it, you would get a true agree rate. Okay, so that's red. But if we observed a visit and then you recalled it, that's sort of a false agree rate. That's in blue. So you can see here now that a lot of the top sites, they were in the 80, 90%. So again, that gives us some comfort that if you did it and you reported it, we actually saw it. So that behavior can be used as a behavioral linking variable to survey data and between survey data and passive data that we use in, for example, linked imputation or data fusion. There are some big anomalies here, though, where just because we observed you doing it, you didn't necessarily recall it. And that false agree rate can be very low, as you can see, goes into the 20 or 30% range, even for some of the top websites. One of the things I found interesting was business and finance and weather, where there was a very high agreement rate on mobile, but on desktop there wasn't. So, I guess it's just the way you use some of those apps, or whether you get a news feed directly, whether you use weather on your phone all the time and not so much on your desktop. I used to work for the Weather Network in Canada, so I found that kind of interesting. We also dug a little deeper here and looked at quartiles. And again, these are ranked by quartile by your passive data. So again, in some cases here for AOL, it goes from 9% for the lowest quartile for recall accuracy all the way up to 78%. So it's pretty dramatic. And for others like Google, 51% to 68%. So not a huge difference. People do remember. But generally, the underreporting problem was more severe for mobile than it was for desktop. We're still pretty happy with the results as they for the top sites where you did have a lot of agreement. But there's definitely a lot of learning that we could do here in terms of which types of sites provide you with the most consistent data that will also differentiate for us and act as linkage variables for data fusion. So consistent underreporting for smartphone and desktop. More frequent users are most likely to self-report. Ongoing research is going to control for demographics. We'll do a little bit of modeling. Also, intensity of usage, different ways of using the internet or a mobile phone will be control variables for these studies. And we're going to look at segmentation differences. If you're a part of a segment, do you actually do that behavior when we see you online? And the final point I want to leave you with is this is all for us to take on an approach, a measurement science approach that less is more. Ask less questions when you can. Take that data from passive data if you can, and then link it in a very smart way. And that's it. Thank you.